Welcome to Chromatic Roses, where a couple of Midwest women cultivate a community at the D&D table. This is it. You're at it. I'm Caitie.
And I'm Soren. And this week we are going to be talking about character archetypes at the D&D table.
Yeah. We've created our own.
We did.
So this isn't, you can't find this anywhere else. This
anywhere else.
Super unique and never been
no
thought
one's
of
ever
this
done
way before. They've
no
done
one's
it.
No one's ever
like
made gay pop before. But today?
Okay. Anything she does is triggering because I've competed against her locally. And so anytime I see her in the public eye, I'm just like, oh,
I know
you. I'm too close to that somehow.
Too few degrees.
Yeah.
So we made a list of 5 D&D character archetypes that we think most, if not all, D&D players fall into. And to preface a little bit before we get into the list, we do kind of feel like this is not a one size fits all. You are only this personality type. You are only in this house in the magic school. You kind of lean into multiple camps, but that's just to clarify a little bit.
We were talking about these. So this was one that we prepped for pretty significantly, I think, in comparison to how we sometimes prep for episodes where we just kind of go for it. This one we talked about pretty heftily. And one of the things that we talked about was how we saw ourselves in multiple camps.
Yeah.
And I think that makes sense. So to Soren's point, we even in one session, I might be a couple of these rather
3
than
different
just
things.
one. But there's 1 or 2 that I am most predominantly in whenever we go to sit down to play D&D.
Yeah. When we were discussing it, Caitie was like, there's probably 9 times out of 10, you probably default to one of these archetypes, but that doesn't mean that none of the others are present.
And none of them are bad.
No.
None of them are bad or wrong.
Nope.
We are going to talk about pros and cons for each. So there is sometimes some uh-ohs that we could fall into. But none of them are inherently incorrect.
And it reminds me of I do a lot of tarot reading, and it reminds me of none of the cards in tarot are bad. And that is something you learn early on. There is excess and there is crap. What's the opposite of excess?
Disparity? No. Sparity?
Thank you. Yeah. There is lack of, and then there is excess. So like most things in life, balance is what we all strive for. Right. But so too, it applies to these archetypes as well. There can be an excess and there can be a balance. And
then maybe if we can figure it out ourselves, or if somebody wants to tell us how to do it, we'll make a personality quiz. And if you don't already know which one you are, you can, and we'll have little graphics. I don't know. We'll figure it out. So if you're good at developing personality quizzes, send us an email. Okay. The first one, the first archetype
ding
is called the historian.
The historian.
So the historian to us is the person who's taking notes all the time. They are highly familiar with the lore of the campaign. They know what happens each session. I would go so far as to say that they're not just taking notes in their own character's perspective, but they're taking notes on the entire session as it happens to each character. When you're not sure what happens, you look to this person to say was it this or this? And then they go, hang on 1 second, and they flip through their notes and they go, it was this,
They're most often the person that when the DM says, shall we do a recap? And they just look at that person. DM even relies on this person.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah. We tried to create a database at one point for our campaign, and then we kind of let it go.
It still exists.
But if they were somebody who had oodles of times on their hands, they might make a database with like serious descriptions of who
we made
is.
I'll send it to TJ so that we can share the link, but it was a Notion template that we downloaded from a DM, but he created like a template that is a database for a campaign. So you can plug in NPCs and backstory moments, and each character can have their own page. So each person can dive in and type whatever they want about all their stuff. And it's very comprehensive.
I also wouldn't be surprised if this person has put a lot of thought into like their own backstory.
Yeah.
Like I feel like these people tend to fall into like
methodical land.
Yeah, and like novelization, and like wanting to be as detailed as possible. It probably comes to nobody's surprise that this is one that I see as myself often. And like, maybe this is just me, but this is something that like, it will never occur. But if it did, and we made some sort of an adaptation of anything of any kind for our campaign, like it would be my notes that would
you would be looking at my notes.
Yeah. If we were to make a graphic novel of this story, we would need my notes to keep track of what happened and when.
You might need my notes for the stupid doodles, but you will need Caitie's notes for the details.
Right. And that's one of the things that we talked about, was each archetype having kind of like a key takeaway. And for the historian, we put like details. The story beats are really important to this person. When they're coming to D&D to play, one of the things that they're thinking about is the story beats that will happen in today's session, like that kind of a thing. Anything you want to add to the definition of the historian? Anything I missed?
I don't feel like I would ever fully identify like as a historian. I think personally, I am a historian of my own character, because there are even players who like just don't take notes.
Yeah.
But like I take lots of notes about my character and their interactions. But I am one of those players that doesn't take a ton of notes if my character's not involved. And that's kind of to help me compartmentalize things and to keep a little bit of excitement and mystery about other characters' story beats and lines. But yeah, that's all I have to add.
So the pros of the historian would be that they know what's going on. And if you have a historian at your table, chances are you've got the story from session to session on lock. Like they know that, which to an extent I would dare to say allows for other people like yourself to take more character specific notes, because somebody's being
specific about all of it.
Yeah. So this person has that under control. Another pro of the historian would be like, at least for me, I'm attentive to the entire session. I think we've talked about this in previous episodes where we talked about note-taking. Note-taking helps me stay focused on what's going on and not drift off to online shopping or whatever else.
Yeah. Yes. It's a very engaging form of playing.
Right. Some cons, though, for this is that, like, and I speak from experience, sometimes I'm taking notes to the point where I like miss opportunities for role playing. And it's not from a perspective of like, everybody forgot me.
Slow down. I want to
listen. It's more from like
oh shit.
There maybe was a moment of downtime where I could have inserted an idea or an interaction that would have added value to the story, but I was so busy taking notes that I missed that opportunity to insert whatever that idea was. And I don't think that happens all the time, but there are just moments when
it does happen.
It does happen. And to that point, my processing, I think sometimes I'm just realizing this right now. My processing can become delayed because I'm trying to keep up with what everything that's being said. So like Sam will drop a lore bomb and I'll be typing and everyone will have already been like, sorry. And I'll be like, sorry. So I think historians have the possibility of missing out on more impulsive interactions and more impulsive story engagement because we're taking so much of our focus on making sure that we have all the details noted and like trying to decide what is important enough to put in my notes, what's not important enough, what can I skip, and then being organized enough within my notes to know what is my character's knowledge and what is not, and making sure that I have a system to denote that.
And we have a whole episode on that. If anyone wants to go back and listen to that, we'll link it somewhere.
Yeah.
I think an additional con that I don't see really happen at our table, but could definitely be just a con in general, is that there is space for the historian to also be the actually and like the like corrector and the like it wasn't that way. So just something to like consider or look out for. I've literally never seen Caitie, or sometimes I would consider TJ to be a historian as well. I've never seen either of you do that, but I think that opportunity is there for some.
I do think there's been a couple times when NCP names get jumbled or something like that, and we will be the ones to be like, it wasn't that person, it was this person. But I think if you are a historian, if you're somebody who's taking extensive notes, it's all in the delivery, man. If you need to make a correction, like that stuff happens, especially for our group because we meet at best once a month. Chances are people are going to forget what's up, and that's okay. But then instead of being like, actually it is, like whatever, it's just like, oh, you're talking about this, right? I think you meant this person, or I think you meant this, like there, it's just all in the delivery, man. Just don't be an asshole,
Yeah. Agree.
Great.
That's the historian.
Say the next one.
So the next character archetype in our list of 5 is going to be the Lurker. You might be familiar with this phrase when it comes to streaming personalities, people who stream video games online, D&D, all that stuff. There are people who will just chill in the comments and are just here for a good time. And that is kind of the key takeaway we've given the player personality of the Lurker. They might not necessarily be here with the intent to contribute a ton to the story, but they are part of it, and they're happy to be there with their friends and hang out. It's when Caitie and I were talking about this, she was saying that the phrase like the audience member doesn't feel right because that there's a certain amount of like distance that an audience member kind of implies, and with a Lurker there's still a level of like interaction and interest that is still kind of present. So we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah,
with the Lurker.
it's like it is still social.
Yes,
like the social. Lurker is still here to be social. I'm old, so this might be incorrect, but Lurker implies if you are lurking in somebody's stream, it implies that you're not active in the chat at all. You're just watching, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like to me, how that translates to D&D is you're being social with your friends, but you're not necessarily interested in your personal contribution to the story. You're interested in watching the story unfold in front of you. And I think this is one that can sometimes unintentionally feel negative. I mean, we've talked about it more than once about like, show up and care. You know,
Yeah.
we've talked about like, if you're
Give
not
a
taking
shit.
notes, you know, whatever. Yeah. And I want to ensure that we say that it is okay to be a lurker in your D&D group. Like that,
Yep.
that's fine. Well, we'll get to this in the cons, but I just want to be clear that I don't think either of us see this as a negative role.
Yeah.
It's just,
No, not at all.
is sometimes if I had like a really stressful week, I might fall into a lurker role because I don't have the like bandwidth to like contribute. But I want to be there and I want to hang out with my friends, but I just like don't have the energy to
but it's not coming from me tonight.
Right. Yeah. So like I think this is just like a vibe that you might fall into, or maybe this is like your default and you're like, I just don't want to be that active, and like that's okay.
I think that can lead us into the pros. So some of the pros for a lurker are like, you could quite literally be the kind of person that has no interest in role playing, but you still want to do this fun play pretend game with your friends.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be a theater kid to play D&D and to enjoy it with your friends, and there is room for you at the table to just hang out and enjoy a good story. So I think that's a pro, is being able to vibe with your friends.
Yeah. And sometimes because you're so observant, like that gives you really good opportunities for like the one liner or the like, oh, I see this opening, I'm gonna take it kind of a thing. Just because you're so in tune to like what's going on around you, you have more ability for some of those opportunities.
I think there's the tiniest bit of like an opportunity for the lurker to maybe fill in some gaps for the historian.
Sure.
Because maybe there are moments where, like we said earlier, the historian misses like a story beat, misses a lore bomb, but that lurker is just hanging and watching it, and they can fill in that hole for them and kind of be that friend to see those opportunities and pick them up. So I think that's also a pro of being a lurker.
Yeah. On the other hand, lurkers can sometimes be misconstrued as not giving a shit.
Yeah. And that's like the nature of it, because you are just chilling, right?
So I'm not trying to say that it's your job to like prove to your friends that you care.
Yeah.
But if you are somebody who likes to lurk and prefers to lurk, then I think you need to just be like mindful of the fact that this is something that could be at play in your group. And I like, to that point, as we were talking about it, I was kind of like, I think lurkers may only work if it's a larger group.
Yeah.
Because if you've got like a really small table and it's like two people are carrying all of the role playing and you're just kind of sitting there, that is going to be much harder than if you've got a bigger group of people who are bouncing off of each other and like whatever. And you can just
add a lot of friction to moving the story along.
Right.
Which doesn't mean that you can't be that one, but it might mean that you need to figure out how to not be a lurker as often.
Yeah. Maybe
in smaller groups.
Yeah. It's like, maybe you lurk and are the historian, you know, like, you know, maybe you're constantly taking notes and that kind of allows you the space to be a little bit more quiet. But you have to know that this is a collaborative storytelling game at its core. So
if we haven't mentioned that already.
Right. So it is not a parasocial relationship like one with a streamer where you can just kind of sit and watch. This is, in fact, a collaborative storytelling game. And so there has to be like a little bit, right?
A partnership.
So there's, I think, to D&D, maybe in its whole, but as we're talking about this role specifically, you got to be able to read the room like a little to be able to like know how you are fitting in this group of people and the best way to like be a good table mate, you know.
I would agree.
The Camp Councilor
Moving on.
Moving on.
Number 3.
Number 3, the Camp Councilor. I named this one. And I named this one Camp Councilor for a reason. And to me, this person is they're probably a frequent role player. And they are here to like bring other people in to the story and into the scene and into the moment. And when I was describing this to Soren, I mean, she laughed a little bit because I was like, first of all, I see this as you. And then I said, but this person is the like at summer camp when you're doing a cheesy activity and the kids are like kind of like, okay, here we go. This is the camp counselor who is into it. And because she is into it, so are you. She's going to fold you into the activity and you will have a great time because of it. But
you're gonna have fun whether you like it or not.
Yeah. So this person is like watching out for perhaps the lurker, perhaps the historian, and making it so that they have equal opportunity to participate and have a good time. Because I see this person as Soren, this is also the person who, when somebody's starting to like get overwhelmed, they're probably the first person to be like, "You're good. It's okay. Take your time." You know, like, or whatever.
I think as a person who has had enough experience in D&D and like physically being at the table with friends at this point, I think that part and that overwhelm is like over for me. So when I see I'm especially that way for new players. Yeah. So when I see like new player overwhelm, I'm like, it's okay. What's wrong? It's all right.
Yeah. right. Yeah. So the pros of being a camp counselor.
Hey, camp
oh, look, a strawberry.
Look, a strawberry.
Is that your table, if you have a camp counselor present, your table is much more likely to be wholly participative. Like there is more
fun here.
There's more opportunity for more people to get pulled in because of it. And because, as we've said, this is a collaborative storytelling game. That's a good thing. We want more voices. More voices are better.
I made the joke to Caitie when she was describing this archetype. I was like, I'm sorry, is this the mom friend? And she was like, I mean, a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a little pro of the camp counselor is not necessarily that they like to read the room, but they intuitively pay attention to the room and try to find those opportunities to encourage those who otherwise might not jump in.
Yes. I am having a thought forming in the middle of trying to like say something else. Well, okay.
Do it.
Remember the Magic the Gathering color thing that we just did?
Yes.
Okay. What if you've got your pie, like this is a pie.
Okay.
And you are a certain percentage of all of these things to an extent.
Okay.
And your like top 3 form this like personality. You know what I mean? So like we'll get into it, but I kind of see myself as okay, great. I kind of see myself as the historian and a little bit of the camp counselor and like a little bit of, spoilers, the strategist. And so like that is a unique amalgamation of those categories. Whereas like, what do you think your top 3 would be?
The camp counselor, the historian, and the pot stirrer. Spoiler alert.
Spoilers. And so that's like a unique thing. And we have shared traits. Your pot stirrer and my strategist create a different giant woman. You know what I'm saying?
Giant woman.
You know what I mean?
Giant woman. I do.
Okay, anyway.
We made cool.
That has that's neither here nor there. I just had that thought while I was thinking of this.
But I love that. And I started drawing a pie.
Wow. So yeah, because like I think why I got there is because I also see myself as a camp counselor to an extent.
I do too.
And it is very much like enjoying the social aspect so much so that I want to interact with all of my friends in this game via this game. And so like, if you're sitting over there lurking, I'm gonna be like, you want to come in the water? It's nice.
We haven't talked in a minute.
But also a little bit of like, because of my historian sprinkle, there's also part of me that is like, oh, I see this thread. I see where this thread is going. And so I'm going to pull this thread to like further this plot line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, pros of the camp counselor are that a lot of people get to be involved, and they are somebody who has their finger on the pulse of story beats, but from the perspective of like actively
pursuing them.
Yes.
Cons.
Yeah. Great.
One of my thoughts with a con for the camp counselor is there is an excess side of the camp counselor where it probably can feel pushy. Like you're constantly dragging the same people, or like you're constantly trying to pull the lurker. So like there is a certain amount of like, I said earlier that the camp counselor kind of intuitively reads the room. They kind of have to like utilize that well, or you can kind of become pushy when people might not be feeling it.
Right. Somebody might be lurking for a reason. Yeah. Like,
right.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of empathy to be able to, this is why we're linking this video, because I'm kind of in the same headspace as talking about hidden character information versus out of character versus I'm the player versus this is like, you're balancing all of that. And so there's this fun experience of, okay, I pulled my friend into this role play. And now I'm talking at them through this character, but Soren is also in the head looking at this player friend and thinking, okay, how are they as a person receiving this roleplay moment right now?
Yeah.
So
I 100% agree. And like I think this also becomes one of those moments where I think I will always and forever prefer D&D with friends. I've never played D&D with strangers, and the more I think about it, the more I never want to do that.
Sure.
Because part of why I think I can do stuff like that in our group is because I know our friends. So like I can tell when Justin's not here for this right now, and then I leave him alone. You know what I mean? But if it's a random rando, and I pull them in and they're not into it, I don't know, you know?
And I think that's where I would go back and forth on that. I think there are times where playing in a group of people I'm not familiar with would be exciting in that I don't know them well. And so I think I would lean heavily into being a pot stirrer and probably continuing to be the camp counselor, because there's a certain amount of anonymity that I think would be fun to be like, I don't know you, so let's see like what you can handle. You know what I mean?
This also directly demonstrates anytime we're in public and Soren can have like conversations with strangers about how their hair looks perfect today. And I, unlike Soren, might think that, and then I walk the other way all the time, 100% of the time. We are two different types of extroverts. Okay. I'm an extrovert that thrives on familial and familiar reactions or interactions, whereas Soren gets high off of interacting with strangers. So that makes sense.
All right. Do we have another con for the camp counselor?
Yes, I had one more. I think this role can also become a scene stealer.
Yeah.
Because we are typically the ones that are most comfortable with role playing.
Yeah.
And because of that, we like the awkward silences. We're like, well, okay,
here I go.
And that is maybe unintentionally silencing some of the quieter players.
Yeah, and I've had like a few moments in the big campaign that we play where I'm like, gosh, I feel like we've spent a lot of time on me. And I don't know if that's like DM, bringing story, or if I've been jumping in too frequently, you know what I mean? So there's some of that where it's like, yeah, and I can feel some of that, and it's just something that I have to pay attention to, and something that, honest to God, like does worry me sometimes.
Yeah. If I think by nature of being comfortable with role playing, so much so that we are willing to throw out hands for other people to join, means that we are already so present in character that we know exactly how Tisiphone would respond in this situation. And so we have that in our pocket, like ready to pull out as soon as Sam says, so what do you do? And I think for other players, that can be, I don't get that thing in my pocket until 5 minutes after Sam says, so what do you do?
Yeah.
And so because ours is ready, we're like, well, we'll go first to kind of lead the way. But that, I think, on accident can sometimes make the other people say, well, then I'm just going to keep this in my pocket because Soren and Caitie have already taken care of it. You know what I mean? So I think camp counselor can sometimes, like you said, excess and lack of. I think sometimes being the camp counselor should mean knowing when to keep your idea in your pocket and let somebody's idea come forward first. And that's like a hard balance to strike.
Yeah, I would agree.
Let's TTRPT. Are we changing it officially?
So Caitie and I were prepping for this episode. We're like, okay, instead of doing a roll with it segment, we're going to do a TTRPGT. And good gosh, if you were here for the second to last episode where we introduced the segment, that sounds like a mouthful that I don't feel like saying all the time. And I think TTRPT sounds way funnier and good. So I think we'll go ahead and officially change it. But it's time for our new segment. If you haven't heard or seen it yet, TTRPT. Insert news noise. I was going to say, please do that.
Welcome to today's edition of TTRPT, where we bring you the latest in tabletop role-playing news. Today, we have a special edition of TTRPT with a special edition of the Time magazine brought to you by my mother. Hi, Amy. She handed this to me literally yesterday. It is a special edition of Time magazine, specifically for Dungeons and Dragons, the subtitle being The Game That Changed the World. We're celebrating 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons.
Jeez.
50 years.
That's
came to mind as I had started. I have not read this whole thing, but one of the things that came to mind when I started reading it was the episodes that we literally, it feels like we just did, it's been a minute, but that we just did about the history of Dungeons and Dragons and the crazy stuff that happened with that. And then the satanic panic and all of that. And to now have a Time magazine, whole magazine book that came out about how Dungeons and Dragons is changing the world is bonkers. And how crazy it would feel if like Gygax was still alive to know that this is where it's ended up. And or to be someone that started playing back when it was like the weird thing to do, to see it now be something that is on the cover of Time magazine. As like this cool thing that everyone should know about.
This big change making game.
And like this is straight up 96 pages of
it's a lot of content,
history and the impact and all of this kind of stuff. How bizonkers is that? There's a lot of creators highlighted in this, indie creators as well as the big names that we already know. And that's, I think, pretty cool. There's a lot of art in this, which I think is pretty cool. Just to give you a vibe of what's in this, it talks at first about kind of the roots of D&D and where it started. So if you wanted a much more in-depth version of the history of D&D, might I recommend this issue of Time magazine, because it goes in to the stuff with Gygax and Arneson and all of that, like in detail. And all of the like inspirations of like Pulp Fiction and, Lovecraftian stuff and, just like all of those kinds of things. So it goes into the origins. Then it talks about kind of the game's journey itself. So that's like getting into like how Gygax created it, and then Darnison came in, and then all the crazy stuff with that. The rise and fall of D&D in the 80s, sales and acquisitions, all of that kind of stuff, and into the new generation of D&D. And then there's like a big long timeline that I'll show you here in a second. But then it gets into D&D on screen, which talks about our favorite boys, Brennan Mulligan, Matt Mercer, and all of their friends who play it as like a job. And talked like even more about like some other like 20-sided tavern and all that kind of stuff. Some of those big names. We also talk about Stranger Things and its whole thing. Vecna has his own chapter in here, as well as the D&D movie.
Show a picture.
Let me get through this and I'm going to show you pictures.
Okay.
It talks a little bit about the current ventures of D&D, people who make dice. Ginny D is in here. Baldur's Gate and video games are in here. And then I haven't even read this part yet, and I'm thrilled that it's in here. It's how D&D psychologists and researchers have found that playing Dungeons and Dragons can be an effective way to treat mental health conditions. And how cool that is that that's in Time magazine as like a featured article.
And something that we constantly come back to in this show is talking about how helpful and transformative. And even my therapist has been like, that's good. Like, good. Yes, do that.
I'm going to show some pictures now.
Big old behold.
This is a cool thing because I can't really see. I have to do a cool thing to try to figure out where everything is. Okay, so there's that one. I just pulled some like spreads in general that I thought were neat. This is the beginning of that timeline, starting in the 70s and moving on. And it goes like through to 2024. So there's like 4-page spread of some interesting pieces of that. Our favorite D20 have to kind of like move it back and forth so that the glare of the computer doesn't screw it up. D20 friends, and then our Critical Role friends. I say friends as if we know them personally, because we do. This one I showed Soren before we started recording today, but it's a table. All of that are dice, which is crazy.
It looks like a topographical map.
Yes. When she's not showcasing the 10-year collection, Sydney Engelstein keeps her dice and crafting drawers. 10-year collection.
That's crazy.
That's bonkers.
I hear Matt Colville also has a psycho, like...
So I've heard, yeah.
Not psycho, a bonkers collection, yeah.
This is talking about the partnerships of D&D, so you've got like Monopoly, you've got some candles down here, Converse, Legos, cookbooks, all that good stuff, stamps.
I think the cookbooks are some of the most interesting, like, merchandise to me, because like you could prepare a whole dinner or like a whole like snack night like for a campaign and like just get that much more immersed in your game.
Right. This is not really like the most exciting picture. It's just a mini facing like a dragon on a battle map, but the caption says, "While conquering fears and traumas can be hard, channeling that work into defeating a dragon can help growth feel more achievable." And then in this same chapter, this is like an illustrated gelatinous cube battle. And it says, "Suffocating and all-encompassing, a battle with a gelatinous cube is an apt metaphor for a client's struggle with depression." And then they've just got some like really cool like artistic spreads.
That's so neat.
The magic of D&D can save us. This one says, "The game designer on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition shares her journey with role-playing games and the power of playing pretend." So yeah, if you have a family member that is D&D curious, may I suggest giving them this? Or if you have family members who are like, "What's that you do?"
Or if you have a long time D&D obsessed family member friend, like I see this and I'm like, I need to buy that for my stepdad because he's been playing for decades and I think he would love, and I think you said it when you first brought this out, but he was playing it when it was the silly nerdy thing.
Yeah, right.
And it'd be so cool for him to be like, "Oh, this is kind of awesome."
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like a neat piece of history, if nothing else, to have and to be able to go back to. And I truthfully started reading it before we sat down to record. And I got to like page 12. Like, look at this text. It's a lot. Like, that is the nature of all of this, is just like pages with that kind of text on it. So this, I did think, now that I'm looking at it, is kind of interesting. That's like Gygax's dining room.
Oh, wow.
And got some pictures of those guys.
Jeez, that's crazy.
One of the first lines, I'm just going to share because now I'm thinking about it, and it was a really neat opening. On March 5th, 2008, Emmy Award-winning television host and comedian Stephen Colbert closed his hit spoof news show, The Colbert Report, on an uncharacteristically somber note. "Before we go, nation, I have some sad news. Yesterday, Gary Gygax, creator of Dungeons & Dragons, passed away at age 69. Gary, you will be missed." How much will you be missed?" Colbert asked in his signature deadpan. To the laughter of the studio audience, he revealed and rolled a 20-sided die. 20. May your prismatic spray always bypass your target's reflex saving throw. And the like section right after that said, "It was an odd tribute, even for a fake news show that spent most of its time making light of mainstream topics and events. By 2008, D&D was far from mainstream. But what the longtime D&D fan and future late show host knew was that D&D was relevant, and the death of its co-creator was big news." And it like goes on to talk about that. But that's like the opening vibe was like 2008. This stuff was not worth mentioning most of the time, but those who knew, you know.
I love that.
TTRPGT. And that was TTRPT. Thanks for joining us. Do you know where your children are?
Oh my gosh. I feel like, well, yeah, I feel like anyone our age and above might know that one.
If you don't, maybe you shouldn't be listening to this. I don't know.
Anyway, that was TTRPT. And now we're going to move on.
Back to your regularly scheduled content.
Correct. We're going to move on to the last two character archetypes that play D&D.
Yes, God bless.
So our fourth of 5 character archetypes, character, player.
Well,
everyone's a character. Our next archetype is the strategist. The strategist, I feel like that name is just like a little self-explanatory.
Yeah.
But they are the puzzle solver, the political aficionado, and we'll talk about this in a second, but if you lean into the strategist, it does not mean all you care about is combat strategy. All you care about is political intrigue. All you care about, you know what I mean? It splits down the road. We kind of feel like there are 2 sides to the strategist. Yeah. Go ahead.
So strategist to me takes kind of 2 subtypes. The first one being like combat focused, in that like you want to be able to use your character and even your team as efficiently as possible. You know everything there is to know about your mechanics, and you make it a point to know about your fellow players' mechanics as well, so that you can either use them effectively or help them use it effectively. But I also felt like this took a second camp in the what Soren mentioned, like the political intrigue. Maybe it's not just that you want to be able to use your own mechanics effectively. It could also be that like you get like excitement from the diplomacy side of D&D. Like generally D&D adventures, not always, but sometimes are taking these like larger than life adventures where we're, like the things that we're doing affect the whole world as it stands. And maybe you find more interest in the interpersonal political workings of this world's government and how they're handling it and how you interact with that world because you're this big adventurer who's helping.
Yeah. And I feel like it will not come as a shock to anyone that this is probably like if you have all percentages of all these archetypes, I feel like strategist is one of my lowest. And not because I don't like a good puzzle, not because I don't like a good conflict or conversation to work in and out of, but it probably comes from a similar space as math, like the way I feel about math sometimes.
I also, we made a distinction between the camp counselor and the strategist when it comes to role playing, and that camp counselor is more of an emotion driven role player, whereas the strategist is more of like a cerebral role player.
Oh geez, I realized we didn't even say the key takeaway for the camp counselor.
You're right.
The big key takeaway for the camp counselor is collaboration and emotion driven role playing.
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas the strategist, like Caitie just said, might come from more of a cerebral type of role playing that is problem solving driven.
Yeah. We can recap all the key takeaways at the end too.
Good point.
The strategist, we kind of talked about having like kind of a long game focus as far as overall outcomes, overall consequences, either from the combat and like how we need to handle this combat because of the long-term consequences, or the long-term consequences of like the adventure at large and how it fits into the political workings of the world that we're engaging in.
And you used a lot of you when we were talking about it, you used the phrase frequently, like the strategist often thinks from big picture perspective.
Yeah.
And then how they slot into big picture overall.
Right. Mm-hmm. Pros of a strategist is that combat is, I don't want to say like easy for you, but it's a thing that is not intimidating.
Yeah.
And you are often where the camp counselor is trying to bring people into the emotional moments and making sure everybody's got a voice in role playing. You're probably somebody who's helping everyone figure out their character sheet and how to use it. Mm-hmm. Also, from the other like kind of subtype camp, if you're somebody who is more of a cerebral role player, chances are you've got a handle on the like overarching world building better.
You're
than
either
most.
Partly historian or buds with the historian.
Right. I think of, there's a couple party members of ours that I think fall into this kind of cerebral role player camp. This is not a bad thing, so I'm just going to say it. Grant and Emily, to me, fall into this camp sometimes. And when I think about their role playing, like sometimes they are onto a thread that I haven't even seen yet because they understand the larger working of the political side of things that I'm just not paying attention to.
They're like politically 2 or 3 steps above where I was walking. And I'm like, I haven't caught up to that step.
So, if there's like a big, I'm thinking of in our campaign, the like crystal to like plane shift, aileron, whatever. I have a feeling if we were to ask them later tonight at D&D, I would bet Grant and Emily understand the implications of that and the implications of that in comparison to the like political environment that exists currently. I bet they have a better handle on that than I do.
Same.
And so like that's kind of what I mean by cerebral role playing. Like they aren't necessarily, I think there are some times when Emily and Grant would fall into that like combat strategist as well. Yeah. But when I'm talking about the cerebral role playing, that's kind of what I mean is that it's less about the like Sam puts on a heart-wrenching song and everybody's crying because it's like a meaningful moment. I mean, like they are sitting there going, like pulling the like political threads of.
They see the chessboard.
Yes.
They see the chessboard and they are maybe already thinking of the next couple plays that opponents can make and that we can make.
Right. Yeah. So pros being that you've got a pulse on that and you often know the mechanics of what's going on. Either in game or in combat. Cons of the strategist, as somebody who falls more into the like combat strategist side of things, I would say a con could be similar to the historian, thinking so heavily into that you miss some of those more lighthearted role-playing moments because you're thinking about the strategy. I would also say a con of strategy, and this is kind of like backhanded a little bit, but it's like I'm so busy helping other people that I don't have a chance to plan my own turn. You know what I mean?
A little bit. Yeah. Well, and I think you've shared like feeling like that every once in a while. Like I'm so busy trying to make sure you know your shit and get your shit. Oh, cool. I haven't even planned my turn.
Right. It's my turn now.
Yeah.
And also like becoming the
de facto point person for like how do I do this?
Like rule keeper of like how does this work? And it's like, honestly, I've never played a fighter.
To your DM.
Yeah, like I've never played a fighter. I don't actually know how this works. I can read the rules same as you can and try to interpret them. And maybe I can do that faster than you. But like, I don't have every class's abilities memorized.
But I'm not your combat calculator.
Right. Oh, one just came up that was similar to stealing scenes. And now I've lost it. Do you have one that has come up for you, a con?
I think there's possibility for a strategist to also lean into a con that the lurker can lean into, which is kind of like disengaging from role play.
Sure.
And that might be more for a combat focused strategist who is like not super interested in the make-believe side of D&D, but the fighting side. So just something to like watch out for and something to like consider is, you know, not leaving your party out to dry. Right. If you are not really a lurker and you're wanting to, you know, be a little more engaged. You got it?
I did, yeah. It's not about scene stealing. It's about the actually rules lawyering. And trying to supersede the DM on calls that they make because you think you know the rules better than they do. Or knowing the rules better than a party member and trying to correct them on their turn or something like that. Similar to the historian who can actually. I think it is all in the delivery as far as trying to correct somebody on what they're doing.
I agree.
And you have to have a little bit of Camp Councilor in you to do that, to be able to read the room a little bit and ask yourself, does this need to be corrected?
Yeah.
And if it needs to be corrected, how do I deliver that? Because I not necessarily in our game, in life, I suppose. I teach children, and we literally just a couple weeks ago had a conversation with my intermediate acro class, which is like 8 to 13-year-olds, depending on the class makeup. And we had a conversation a couple weeks ago about how it feels to receive corrections from a friend versus receiving a correction from the teacher. So I have a couple of kids in that class who are family members. They're cousins, and they like to tell each other when they're not doing something right.
Actually.
And they're never mean about it in intention. They just like, I'm watching you do this and I see that you're not doing it right. And this is what you're not doing right. And it almost always riles the other one up to be like, nah, like, you know, like that kind of thing.
Because it feels like a superiority thing.
Right. And so I saw that for a couple of classes. And I eventually, after a couple of times of that, sat down at the beginning of class and said, okie doke. How does it feel when a friend tells you that you're not doing something right? And they were like, it's kind of embarrassing and it makes it feel like they're better than me and like all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, right. And then how does it feel when Miss Caitie gives you that kind of correction? And like it, like unprompting, they were like, oh, it's way different.
That's what you're supposed to do.
I know you're trying to help me, and that's the role you're supposed to be playing. You know, they said it in 8-year-old words, but like basically that was the vibe. And it's exactly that when trying to do corrections in D&D, especially in combat where there is probably a objective right answer. And you have to be able to read the room enough to know, can this person receive a correction from me right now? And is this correction even worth making? Or would the game be fine even if I didn't make this correction?
Really, D&D is just a case study in interpersonal communication.
It's collaborative storytelling. I mean, you have to know.
Oh man, it's true though. And like I'll put and this is for relating to you's sake, I deal with ADHD. We already know that. What? And something like a key point of ADHD that some people experience is this impulsivity to just say what's on your mind and just go ahead and do it. So like growing up, I got called bossy a lot. And it was because I was very impulsive with the teacher said you didn't do that right. Like I was that kid. Even in my adult years, like I've worked on it a ton, and there was a part of me that was being driven by, but like I should share the truth and like be kind about it, but sometimes it doesn't matter how kind you are, and you're still going to hurt people every once in a while. And so as an adult, you said this phrase and it was like, oh, I actually have to ask myself that quite a bit sometimes as an adult, is this necessary? Does this add value? Does this detract? And then make my decision based on that.
I think I am not an actual school teacher, but I feel like I've heard my teacher friends say something like, is it necessary? Is it kind? Is it true? Is it like those kinds of things? So it's like asking those questions before you say it. And when I say like, can this person receive a correction right now? I'm thinking about when early on you would get overwhelmed in combat. And if you were in that space and somebody tried to be like, actually what you want is, or this isn't actually how that works, like that is asking for somebody to be like, to snap back and be like, that's wow, thank you for that, great, you know, like that kind of a thing. So I think that's a two-way street in that like whoever you are working with, the hope is that you're coming in with the mentality that this is a collaborative game. Hopefully you're coming in with the mentality that like we're all here to have a good time, you know, like all of that kind of stuff. And you are aware enough to be able to say like, hey, I appreciate your help. I'm just feeling really overwhelmed right now and I like need a second. But
which is a great skill to learn, everybody.
Right. But at the same time, with it being an interpersonal collaborative game, as the person who understands the rules and knows more than the average about each thing, being able to look at somebody and say like, okay, I think me trying to insert myself to help is actually not going to be helpful in this moment. So I'm just going to let her figure it out. And if she needs help, she'll come ask me for help.
That's something that like, I noticed about you and TJ, that you've I don't want to say like you've increased doing this, but like it's a mannerism that actually has become a cue for me. And it's not even like you and TJ looking at me being like, you gonna ask for help or no? But it never feels like that. It feels more so like I'm not gonna offer help unless you tell me you need it.
Yeah, right. I know, you know, I have this knowledge. So I'm gonna sit here with it
if you want it,
and you look over here if you need it.
And that's not a mind game by any means. I think it's also a good hey everyone, you're gonna learn a little bit about me and Caitie's friendship today. It's a little bit of like, I can't know what you're thinking unless you tell me, bud.
It's that couple episodes ago when I said, I can see that you're struggling.
Yes.
But I cannot come over there and help you or it's going to seem mean.
Yeah.
So you got to tell me, you have to admit it to yourself that you're struggling so that I can come help you, but I'm not going to help you until you say that. Yeah. And I think that's, again, like I prefer to play with friends because I know that about you. You know, so like I know to like back the hell off until you're ready for help, and you will let me know when you're ready for help, you know.
I think I could clarify like what I said earlier. If I'm playing a long campaign, I think I would prefer it to be friends. If I'm playing a short campaign,
one shot,
that is a one shot or maybe like a 5-session story.
Sure, right.
Or
there's
like
a finite end.
There's like an end in sight.
Yeah.
This is not a continue it until we feel like stopping. Right. I think that is when I'd be more comfortable to play with strangers.
Yeah,
because like there's and we're getting tangential and long-winded about this, so we'll move on to the next one soon.
Okay.
But there is a point at which I would be cooler playing with strangers, because there is a certain point with strangers where, and like people sound off in the comments, or like Caitie, tell me if you also feel this. Sometimes with strangers, there's a point at which I can feel a little more judgmental and a little less grace giving because I don't know you. Like,
yeah,
I'm not going to put up with this behavior. I don't know you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I can definitely get more judgy for strangers. I tend to people please to the point where I would just be like, correct me every time. Okay. And right. But then I would go home and be like, this one,
I don't want to play anymore.
I hate that.
Yeah.
So I might be more tolerable to that, but it would make my overall time worse.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Cool.
Last, but certainly not least, is the pot stirrer.
The pot sticker.
The pot stirrer is somebody who pushes buttons.
Oh.
And not in a negative way. I don't mean that in a negative way at all. One of the words that we used for this is like exploration. Mm-hmm. And I think that is very indicative of what I'm trying to get at. They are somebody who, it could be somebody who's new to D&D, who is here to get silly and wants to see what happens. I also think of the person who, playing a video game, like tries to hit everything to see if like something pops out of it.
Yeah, or tries to interact with everything. Yeah. What does the floor smell like?
Right. It's somebody who wants to see what the DM will do. If I do this, what do you do? And could also mean an interpersonal pot stirrer, in that I'm gonna come over to you and be like, hey, Laura, tell me about your family. You know, or like I can see you're guarding this, so I'm gonna ask you about it.
What's up with that?
Yeah.
And honestly, that could be a specific type of person, and they carry that energy into all their characters.
Sure,
so it could be a little less their character and a little just more them. Like the player who is like, hee hee. Yeah. I'm going to hide behind this character, but this is fun. You know what I mean?
And I think that this can be true in certain characters. This could be true for the person. Maybe it's true that you like to explore, but you're like not trying to poke the bear, you know, like that kind of a thing. I think you can take on parts of the pot stir, and maybe some parts aren't as true for you. But to me, this is just somebody who's like a little chaotic, a little bit wanting to see what happens if I push this or do that.
Yeah, we've talked about this. I think I wasn't sure exactly how you meant it when we were discussing it before we started recording, but you mentioned that we think our friend Emily is a little bit of a pot stirrer, and I agree with that, but I hadn't thought of it in the, like, I think we can say the phrase pot stirrer and assume that's kind of flamboyant and like loud, but like our friend Emily is like very quiet, and so like you can be a pot stirrer and be like quiet about it, demure about it.
Very mindful, very demure. Anyway,
very mindful.
Emily's one, and I feel comfortable saying this. I think she'd agree with me.
Emily.
If I put a button in front of her, she's gonna push it.
She's like,
because it's in front
enticing.
of me, and you put it there. So clearly, you want me to push it.
Right.
And that was very much like in Grant's campaign. She took on a like, okay, if you're gonna put this in front of me, I'm gonna touch it.
I'm gonna smush it.
And I'm going to find all the buttons you've also hidden. And
Where's
see
your trap
if you
card?
Remember that you hid them. You know, like that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So like, you know, that I think pot stirrer can take on many a different vibe. I'm also thinking of like somebody who wants to fill silence. Could also be a pot stirrer.
I also think of
say shit and see what happens.
Yeah, and I think new players can fall into this archetype early on, and you either might grow out of it or continue down this way. But I think there's some natural pot stirring in being a new D&D player, because you are figuring it out and you are learning the rules. And so how else are you going to figure out where those rules stop and start unless you stir the pot?
Right. And I think the main takeaway, at least this is what I wrote, was the push boundaries.
Yep.
So like, it's like pushing boundaries, and you could be pushing boundaries of the environment. You could be pushing boundaries of the rules. You could be pushing boundaries of interpersonal interactions. You could be, like you're just like sitting here, like touching walls to see if they're real or if you can go through them. Ashton in campaign 3, Talison's character, feels 100%. Like a pot stirrer to me.
Yeah.
He coined the like, what the fuck is up with that thing, where they were like sitting in a tavern, and he's like, Laudna, you've got a crazy patron. What the fuck is up with that? And just like trying to get people to share their baggage. Imogen, you've got purple veins. What the fuck is up with that?
This is weird, right? We're all gonna
we're all addressing that this is odd.
This is odd, correct?
Right. And so like they became like a little drinking game for their party, was to go around and everyone got to say what the fuck is up with that question to somebody else. So I that very much fits this, I think. Pros of being a pot stirrer, I think, is just that. You are here to explore the game at every turn. And if it weren't for you, some story threads maybe would have been left laying on the ground.
Yeah, and I think that a pro of being a pot stirrer can, I think it's similar to the Camp Councilor in that you are showing the party the, not necessarily the boundaries, but you're opening up the world. Like you are kind of lifting the veil on either the silliness or, whatever vein you want to go down. But you are like, look, there are more options than whatever box we've put ourselves into.
Totally.
And so I think that's very helpful.
I also think that a pro of the pot stirrer, in contrast to the Camp Councilor, is that you keep things lighthearted. When the Camp Councilor is like, come here, I want you to feel things with me. the pot stirrer is like, I'm Mary, and like keeps things really silly.
This is just going to become Chromatic Rose lore, that we have like a little goblin named Mary in our bushes.
Well, you don't know. So I value pot stirrers sometimes when the vibes are on the floor. They're a morale boost, like 24/7 a morale boost.
They're a little sugar rush,
and sometimes you need that. I think to that point, though,
let's flip it.
A con of the pot stirrer: not every moment is supposed to be lighthearted.
Not every moment is supposed to be silly.
Yeah.
And I think there are moments where, like the Lurker, it can feel like you don't care.
Yeah. It
can feel like you're making a whole joke of this make-believe game.
Yeah.
When it's in excess.
Yes. Yeah. And I think also, I think that's along the same line as if the party's trying to move the plot forward, and you keep kicking rocks to see if they turn into something, like that's also detracting from the experience. I forget which episode it was, but we were talking about like, if your bit is making it so other people can't participate, that's a problem.
Yep.
So it's the pot stirrer with all of these that we talked about. It's this balance between lack of and excess of, and you have to know where that balance is. So if you've been doing a bit for 20 minutes and we can't move on the story because your bit is still happening, you need to stop doing the bit.
It's time to move on.
Right. Or if your bit is if the bit is constantly interrupting another player because it's funny.
Yeah.
Like the first maybe 2 times was funny, and then every time after that was not funny.
Yeah. And this could be I mean, the same could apply. Like, I'm thinking of unfortunate lessons I had to learn growing up was that for me sometimes, and like LOL, there are times I fall into pot stir category, but growing up and kind of living in that headspace, I would sometimes like make an inside joke with my friends, and then because this is like a thing with ADHD also, is like I have these different stims that I find I will get joy or interest out of a certain phrase. I remember movies very well because I like hearing those one-liners over and over again. I listen to songs repeatedly. I would repeat said inside joke too many times to the point where friends had to be like, it's not funny anymore. Like, we're done now. And like, that sucked growing up. But like, it's coming from that space of like, you gotta learn when to just let it drop.
Yeah. I also think of, I think the pot stir has a certain level of impulsivity to it. And it makes me think of Campaign 3 spoilers. So heads up. Ashton does something really impulsive.
Yeah.
And it almost gets him killed. And the party has to spend all of their resources trying to keep him alive while this plays out. And even the DM, even Matt Mercer, was like, my dude, halfway through this. And Taliesin in the campaign was like, Ashton didn't know. And I remember that episode, Matt being like, what do you mean? I like laid it out pretty clear what was going to be the consequence of this. So like, here are the consequences. And like, this isn't going to be good. And like, Ashton almost died. And if it wasn't for the entire party, like pouring their healing stuff into him, that would have been it. And the players, like, I remember that episode, like Marisha and Laura and like all of them were like, the fuck are you doing? And like, I say all of this, they're fine. Like they're friends and it's fine. But like, there was a moment where the impulsivity that Ashton and or Taliesin had and acted upon ended up being a really bad consequence. And there was interpersonal fallout from that in the like party dynamic. Like after that, like Fern like punched him in the face. And like there was some fallout from that. So like, I think a con of the pot stirrer can be that the impulsivity in excess can result in bad vibes with the party, depending on the consequences of that impulsivity.
Yeah. And so like to kind of like tie that up with a neat little bow, and as a reminder, anytime like we're talking about the excess of something, I think we are really leaning into that too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. Balance is hard in general, but it's something that we all kind of have to weed through and figure out when we're playing D&D. And that's why I think, to go back to what Caitie was talking about when she was walking us through some of the Time magazine, is that it can be a great lesson in interpersonal communication, in like interpersonal bonding and coping strategies, and good and bad on all sides. And the pot stir is part of that larger puzzle and picture as well.
And like to that point, like I said, Ashton did this dumb thing, and it was dumb and it was bad and it was really tense for like an hour. And then who knows what Critical Role their cast did to like aftercare and mediate some of that.
We're going to McDonald's.
They're fine. Like, it's okay. So like when you have moments of excess it's not the end of the world. Like, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But just like it is something that as players, we should make a point to try to be conscious of, so that we do it not all the time, number one. Yeah. And number two, when maybe we do start to hit into an excess of something, we can acknowledge that and say, like, sorry, dude, I didn't mean to go on this bit for 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. Sorry, you know, like, and to pull off of it, you know, like to acknowledge it and pull off of it, I think is the key. So shall we recap?
Yes.
We've got the historian. I'm going to say the name of it, and then you should say the key takeaway.
And then okay.
Yeah. Okay. So number one, we've got the historian.
Details are king.
Ooh. We've got the lurker.
Here for a good time.
The camp counselor.
Collaboration and emotion-driven role-playing.
Great. The strategist.
Interpersonal strategy and combat effectiveness.
Amazing. And the pot stirrer.
Push them boundaries.
Ooh, all right. Yeah, and I think of all of these, the more we talked about it, the more I think I'm right in that, like, it's a pie, and we all have a little bit of everything. But you probably have one that's your dominant and two that follow up that dominant. And each person has a different amalgamation of all of these things.
That make another subtype.
Right. So somebody who's experienced in creating personality quizzes, let us know how we develop that.
How we did that.
And in the meantime, self-diagnose who you think what your top 3 are. And let's talk about what that means for the larger subtype. If I'm the historian, camp counselor, and strategist, what does that make me? What do we call that?
What is that?
And if you think we've missed one, a key archetype, tell us what that is.
Let us know, and give us their like key takeaway as well.
We tried to keep it as like how somebody plays, and not like, because like one of the things we talked about was like host or like snack bringer. Like that is definitely something that happens in your D&D session, but that doesn't necessarily affect how you play D&D
unless that snack is affecting you paying attention. Because that couldn't be me.
But yeah, so if you have an archetype you think we missed of like how somebody approaches or plays the game, we'd love to hear what those are.
All right, friends, that's it for us this week. Thank you for spending some time with us today, and thanks to Noah Trumbull for the use of our theme song. There's a link to his Instagram in the episode description, so be sure to give him a follow and stay up to date on all his music and the cool stuff that he's working on.
If you are enjoying the show, there's a few things that we'd really appreciate if you would do. We would love if you would leave us a review, pop into the YouTube comments. We have some pretty great discussion there. Have seen some new friends, some new rosebuds hopping into the garden via YouTube. So go show them some love. The rosebuds, they have legs and they hopped.
They are a button.
So
the buds are budding.
So true. Also, you can follow us wherever you get your podcast, subscribe on YouTube, or follow on Spotify, the, Apple Podcasts, whatever, so that you can get to our new episodes easier. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram so that you can keep up to date on what we're doing and seeing some of the cool stuff that we've put out over there.
We also want to hear from you. So follow us on those platforms and then let us know. Did something come up in the conversation today that made you think that you'd like to share with us? Or do you have a topic that you want to hear from us next? Or do you just want to say hi and say that you love being a bud, because we love that you're a bud. Send us an email at chromaroses@gmail.com. That's CHROMAROSES@gmail.com. And that's all lowercase. We can't wait to hear from you.
This has been Chromatic Roses. I'm Caitie.
and I'm Soren.
Oh.
Be nice or else.
Okay, love you. Bye.